The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Simplexity, how to design for simplicity. And our guest speaker today are Vinay Dixit. He's a senior architect with Mindtree. Vinay Dixit is the director of user experience group at Mindtree, responsible
Radna.
for practice, strategy, team development, enabling business development, client management, mentoring, grooming, coaching, aspiring design leaders, thought leadership, practice operations, and sales. Works closely with business verticals such as travel and transportation, media, retail, and manufacturing to design smart and intelligent business solutions across various digital platforms. He has worked for clients like Adidas, Aviskar Rental, Aadhaar UID, Emirates Airlines, De Beers, Millennium Hotels, Sita, P&G, Unilever, Ladbrokes. Likes to observe people, their activities, motivations, and their natural behavior to see how technology opportunities can be exploited for business innovation and solve problems at hand. He is passionate about design thinking, human factors, internet technologies, mobile and sensory technologies, gaming, psychology, and economics. He has learned traits of visual communication, design discipline at National Institute of Fashion Technology, Delhi, India, and applied some of it during his long association with the media and publication industry. He also holds a post-graduation degree in business management, marketing and innovations from NMIMS Mumbai. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Vinay.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Radna. Hello, everyone. My topic of discussion today is really simplicity, or rather design for simplicity. And you know, some of you might be thinking about as to why simplicity. Simplicity as a term doesn't really exist in English dictionary. So we'll learn, you know, as we go along during our session today, we'll learn as to what really simplicity means, and how does it really help us think about designing very, very simple solutions, and simple solutions that our users would love to use. With that, you know, I'm just moving on, and just to give you a historical context of different design disciplines, I think today we talk about creating solutions, creating products that are very, very simple, minimalistic, and something which is directly affect the end user's life, help them do their jobs in a very, very simplistic manner. I think design as a discipline is not really that old, and to me, really, the mother discipline for design really originated from architecture or from communication design or industrial design, for that matter. And if you look at the different school of thoughts over there from very beginning, people started from the classical era, which was early the 1900s, when people were talking about doing design which are very, very ornamental and decorative. So you would look at some of the buildings around you, some of the architectures that you would have noticed around you, be it Greek architecture or be it Roman architecture. Buildings were designed to be very, very ornamental in nature, very, very decorative in nature. You know, the kind of motifs that you find, the kind of pillars, the kind of architecture, the kind of space organization was highly ornamental in nature. However, post 1900, when modernism kicked in, a lot of enthusiasts, a lot of design discipline enthusiasts started talking about, hey, you know what, less is really more. So we got to achieve much more by doing much less, which means that, and those were the times when people were talking about being purist or following international style, which means that you do something in one part of the world, it gets fully applied in the other parts of the world, and it does not have very deeply knit cultural connotations, which means a product or a building or or a function can only sustain or work in a specific part of the world. And people started to work with minimalism, which means that I was sort of emphasizing the whole fact of what can you do by doing less, what can you achieve more by just by doing less. And that was also the time when industrial revolution was taking place, when design was almost like being done as part of mass manufacturing. You will see that pretty much absence of decoration from products, which means that products were made much more functional. Product designers were thinking about things like how quickly we can manufacture them, how quickly we can store them, how quickly we can ship them, and so on and so forth. And there was pretty less decoration that was thought through while designing some of those products during the modernism era. And what we could see clearly is that the forms started to become much more simplified. However, then there was this another era which kicked in after 1975, which we known as postmodernism, and wherein again we sort of challenged the old school thought, and we said that why are we worried about less or more, because less is really bored. So we need to do something which sort of excites people, which sort of gives them some sort of a signature of accessing a product, having or possessing a specific product, and having a unique identity by having that product in their possession. And you will see that some of the buildings or the products done during that time, there was a lot of fusion of forms. So we carried some things from the classical style, we carried forward some of these things from the modernism, and then we created products and buildings and architecture by fusing as to what we learned in last two eras pretty much, because pretty much what we see is less is more. However, right now we are again in a neoclassical era, and neo-modernism, which talks about that you will see most of the buildings around you are started to follow steel and glass, and that clearly shows that it sort of symbolizes again the internationalism, again something which is wherein the structure is given more value than the ornaments, and I think the buildings are becoming more intelligent, and there is every now and then you will see some sort of a revival of style. So I think this whole notion of something being more or something being less or something being more simple and something being complex is a school of thought which comes and goes like any other, like a cyclical event, and it doesn't stay for long. So we have seen it happening. I just wanted to sort of re-emphasize the whole thinking with an example, and this example is a classical piece of work done by a German architect called Mies van der Rohe. He was actually a German who later shifted to the US and did a variety of good work in the area of architecture. And this building that you see out there is popularly known as Farnsworth House, built for a doctor, a female doctor, and you can clearly see the building, while it was done in 1951, way ahead of its time, when people did not really know as to what minimalism and what modernism is all about. Van der Rohe was quite weird of time in thinking about it, and he was thinking of, I'm trying to create a space, rather a personal space, which is going to be a true meaning to what it needs to do. So you can clearly see that the entire structure is laid on a number of pillars. The usage of the space and the elevation, and it is completely pure white in color. It does not use any ornamental values that we would have seen either in the Roman architecture or in the Greek architecture, and it's too sort of simple to be out there. And since it was done in 1951, it sort of created a space for people who started thinking minimalism. People who started thinking that, hey, you know what, I think buildings, there is a new era which is shaping up wherein products and buildings and other objects of use will be designed very, very differently. However, that did not really stay for long, because then there was another architect called Robert Venturi, whose work is also renowned in the architecture space, came up with this whole school of thought called, hey, you know what, less is more now. And why should we stick to simple columns, simple pillars, simple structures, use of whites and grays? Why don't we create products and create structures which people remember for a long time, which has not only the functional value but also the ornamental value in it. And this is a very interesting piece of work that he had done called Wu Hall. It's actually based out of Princeton. It's actually in Princeton University in New Jersey. So if you get a chance, go visit that place. It's a very interesting place in itself. And then I just want to sort of take a moment and talk about I think the most influential designer of all times, known as Dieter Rams. Dieter Rams, I think most portion of his career he worked with a company called Braun, which is a company with, I think if you speak to any of those industrial designers today, they are the people who would respect a company like Braun because of the design thinking and the kind of products that they have created over the last 100 years. Interestingly, Dieter Ram was chief industrial designer for Braun until 1995, almost like 2 decades back, after which he retired. But I think he created multiple masterpieces during his career at Braun, and some of the products that we see today out there, which we sort of worship, be it from Apple or be it from any other companies like Bang & Olufsen or Bose or many of those industrial design concepts, you will see some highlights or some product features that were inspired by a lot of work that Dieter Ram did in his time at Braun. And I think I truly believe that he's a genius minimalistic, and his mantra was do less but do it for better. So one of the quotes, just wanted to quote that he said that simplicity is hopelessly subtle, and many of its defining characteristics are implicit, which means that they're really hidden within the simplicity itself. Now, it's a very strong statement for a designer, because when they say that a design needs to be successful and design needs to be done for a function, which means that design should itself not be evident out there, that there is some design done. Thus, by the product is made much more functional, much more meaningful to its users. And that was the philosophy that Dieter Ram works with pretty much all his life. And this is one of the marvel products that he created. It's actually a blender. And if you notice that these two broad forms, within this blender as an object, which are sort of fused in between each other, and you can see that how they're both able to equally balance each other. So, while there's a container and then there's a blender, but there is this very nice proportion between the two. If you compare, this design was done way back in 1950s. And if you compare it to some of the blenders that we see out there in the market today, you will see that there's a great amount of simplicity to this design. To an extent that if you notice the controls, you will not see a whole lot of information out there talking about, hey, this is speed is for that thing, and if you rotate it this much, then this will happen, and so on and so forth, which you will find today's blender. If you look at something that you buy out there from the market today, those are immensely more complex than what Dieter Ram did in 1950s. So absolutely no controls and meanings of controls are so evident, and there's a whole there's this subtle calmness in the product's form. There's this subtle balance out there, which makes the product look very, very beautiful and elegant. Now, I think what really simplicity for any industrial designer today is really about subtracting the obvious and adding the meaningful to it, which means look at these two designs, and both of these designs come from the same company. And now the one on the left hand side is a bronze shaver, which was designed by Dieter Ram in 1958, and the product, the other shaver that you see, might be more technically advanced than the previous version of it, but then you can see that the control, the form factor, the size of it, and in fact the sheer look of it and the feel of the product is much more complex, and as opposed to the product on the left hand side. The product on the left hand side is a highly subtle, sophisticated, very, very simple and minimalistic, does not really overdone from a control and the features perspective, but the moment you sort of hold it, you feel that there's something sophisticated that you're holding in your hand. And I'm sure that anybody who's looking at it right now, and if I ask as to which one would you go for, I think many of us will probably pick up the left one as opposed to the right one. And I think the question is really about having that simplicity being built as the product's core value. And the right one is obviously not that appealing to me personally. Another example, very interesting one, and today we all sort of praise what Apple has done in last 15 years or so by creating, and this was the product that you see on the right hand side is Apple iPod first generation, which was designed by a designer called Jonathan Ive. And Jonathan Ive himself is a great believer of the thinking that was once created by Dieter Rams in terms of simplicity, in terms of creating much simplified minimalistic products. And he got inspired by one of the radios that Dieter Rams designed in 1949, which you see on your left hand side. And you can clearly see as to the way the control and the size of the control and the feedback, which in the case of a radio is actually a speaker which is mounted on top of the radio. Obviously, in case of an iPod, it is a screen wherein you get to see the feedback, which is also mounted on top of it. And imagine if you're using the radio with one hand and you're also using the iPod with one hand. The experience of using a radio and the experience of using an iPod is not too very different in a way. But I think the philosophy perspective, I think from a design thinking perspective, both of them have a lot of similarities in it. The other, the core principle of achieving simplicity is really about standing for the core values of a product. So, most of us would know as to what is minimal viable product is all about, but when you think about the same thing, not from a feature perspective, but from a product's core value perspective, you start thinking very differently. And one of the examples that I have here is a product called, it's not really a product, but it's a series of products by a company called Oxo. And I'm sure that many of us are using some of these products at home from Oxo. There's this guy Sam Faber who unfortunately died last year in 2013. Faber, looked at his wife one day, and she had some disability in one of her hands, and he realized that she was not able to peel potato properly, and then he sort of wanted to solve that problem. And he realized that many women who are working in kitchen and other household with other household items, they have the same problem, wherein the grips of those products are not really designed to perfection. And he said that he will probably stand up for that cause, and he designed all the household products which are used typically in kitchen products, and he designed all these products with the thinking that those products needs to be held properly so that they don't slip out of the hand, and they are safe to use as well. And that's where the whole Oxo range of kitchen products started. And what they really stand for is the grip. So the grip is a patented grip, which is the same grip that you'll find across all Oxo products, and they are only known for the grip that the product has, and nothing else. So it's really about standing for that very small core value that is delivered to the consumer, for which consumers go and buy their product out there from the market. So, we understood as to, when we talk about simplicity in design, as to what we are talking about essentially. But then I think what we also need to understand is that what is complexity and how to deal with it. There are different, sometimes what I have noticed is that, reading a book, sometimes reading a code can be much more meaningful and in-depth than reading the entire book. And this is a very simple quote that I found from Oscar Wilde, that we live in an age when unnecessary things are our only necessity. Now the meaning is quite deep, and when you start relating into daily things, the daily needs, and the daily the stuff that we sort of aspire for, there's a lot out there. Sometimes that is more meaningful than reading a book on purpose-driven life and so on and so forth. So what happens that things that seems complicated can be very, very simple, and the things that seem simple can be dazzlingly complex. For example, if you look at, open a watch sometimes, and you will see that a lot of things inside a watch. You have complex cogs, gears, springs, flywheel inside a watch, and you see that the whole organization of it is immense complex. One's functioning results into others functioning and controlling the other component within a watch, and so on and so forth. And one would think that it's a very complex thing at the end of it. But what it really does is that it basically helps accurately rotating hour and minute hand in a watch, and that's the simplest job that it does. So there's a lot of complex infrastructure inside which we are not exposed to, but what we really see out there is that it is just helping us move those two needles properly, and that really translates into a simple piece of information that at the moment the time is 10 hours and 10 minutes, and I think this time has a lot of value for us, which means that that really drives us to what we do, what we don't do, and what we do at what time, and so on and so forth. So you will see that there's a complex thing which does a very simple thing, and that simple thing has a very complex meaning in our life. So how do we deal with this? It's not very simple. Now, if I sort of take a very tangent of the same thing into a digital side of the story or internet side of the story, which most of us are related with, searching on Google is super simple. But is Google equally simple? Probably not. I think the algorithms, the kind of coding that has gone behind creating Google in terms of what it is today, there are data scientists, there are human factors specialists, there are engineers, and there are testers, and I don't know what all are actually kind of people who are working behind Google to make it, I think, just one box kind of a simple stuff. And I don't think that we can today imagine a life without Google. So essentially what we're talking about is that as human beings, we really love complexities. We just can't live without complexities being there around us. So most of us love philosophy, and I think I love philosophy, and I'm sort of making a guess that a lot of people around me are also loving philosophy. A lot of people love poetry as well. Now, is poetry simple? No, of course not. Poetry is very, very complex subject. Some meanings are so deep, some meanings are so shallow, but so deep at the end. We all like relationships, but being in a relationship and relationships are also very complex. So I think the essence is that as human beings, we have we have become part of complexity, and we are complexity because we love complexity at the end of it. We just can't live without it. And so it's true with the kind of stuff that we are getting exposed to, which means, if you look at games today, now games are supposed to be complex because you can't afford to make them simple. And if they're not complex, people will play them, get over with them in the next day, and they will not come back to the same game again. But does this also mean that the controls that people use to play those games, do they have to be made complex? No. I think the interfaces with which we play games, the physical controls in terms of jockeys and other products that we use out there in terms of Xbox and Microsoft One, etc., etc. Those are supposed to be designed very, very simple. But what we do out there is play very, very complex games. I think it is if I take a physical connotation, if I take a real life connotation with it, everybody likes to ride bike. But would you like to ride bike at the same speed on a straight road? Probably not. I think the entire enjoyment of riding a bike is only when you sort of do turns, go not on a straight road. You have unexpected turns which you sort of manage and go up and down and so on and so forth. That's when you really enjoy riding the bike. Otherwise, if it is straight road, obviously you will not really enjoy riding that bike. So what we are essentially trying to say is that I think content can be complex, but controls have to be much simpler than what they are, or should be made simpler if they are not simple today. We also think that simplicity is, you have to pay a price for simplicity will come at a price for complexity. So if you really want to achieve simplicity, it's just not possible without adding complexity to it. So it's a very interesting case. We had paper money at one point in time, and somebody came and came up with this brilliant idea of bringing credit cards and said that, hey, you know what? You don't have to carry this money, and I'm going to replace it with plastic. You will have more buying power, but by carrying less of cash at all times in your pocket. But then what happened? We started having multiple cards from multiple banks. There are surcharge fees. There are loyalty points that we have to manage. There are payment cycles. If you don't make payments on time, then you have additional fees. You have multiple pins. You have call centers to deal with. You have frauds. You have theft, and you have overspending, right? So while the idea of replacing cash with a credit card, which is a simple plastic, sounded very exciting in the first place, and thought that it really simplifies our life to a great degree. But then we added much more complexity by bringing that simplicity into our life. So it is just not possible to achieve simplicity without adding complexity. But if you look at it from business's perspective, I think complexity drives sales. People want to spend money to bring complexity home, like this car that you see out there. Now you're a driver. Your attention should be on the road so that you don't end up killing someone. So you can drive safely, and obviously you need certain amount of enjoyment in terms of the music or whatever you do in the car, or maybe a communication system and so on and so forth. But I don't think that you would need complex controls like these ones mounted right on top of your the steering wheel. But imagine if these steering wheels controls are not there, and you are a standard customer who walks into this car showroom, and you find another car showroom or another car company which is actually having these controls right up there. You feel that the product that you're buying is less capable, and your standard inclination is towards buying a product which might be more complex in terms of what it does, in terms of what it can handle, and you're ready to pay more for it because you don't want to buy an underperforming product. So you end up paying more for it, which means that you pay for bringing complexity home. That really works. Even when you sell washing machines like these ones. So imagine if you have a washing machine like this at home. Personally, I think that I will not be able to wash my clothes with so many controls, ups and downs, on and off, increase and decrease and whatnot, right? But then the fact is that we buy products for their features, but not being simple. I think that's a very consumer psychology, and manufacturers and brands and companies in businesses, you start as a clear-cut philosophy to design their products to make them look much more capable and end up selling them more. So, as I was saying, people are not willing to pay for products that look less capable, and at the same time not willing to compromise on controls and end up paying for those things that they don't want in the beginning. And this goes back to the philosophy that Oscar Wilde said, is that people are really after things that they don't need in their life today. So essentially what we are saying is that simplicity is what we love, complexity is what we cannot live with. Then I think there is fundamentally we need to strike some sort of a balance which will continue to keep our life a little more complex than what it is, but also bring some sort of a simplicity in what we do in our daily lives. So that sort of a balance is needed. And I'm just going to talk about in the rest of my sort of discussion or a talk is to how to sort of deal with that, how to sort of keep that balance, and that's where I call this whole phenomena of balancing simplicity and complexity is Simplexity. And that's you will see that title of my talk is really about Simplexity as to how do you really achieve Simplexity in the first place. So there are multiple ways to achieve Simplexity, and I at the same time while I'm talking about it, I also know that there is no silver bullet out there, which means that you apply this principle, you apply that rule, and you make your products much more simpler. I think these are fundamentally some thoughts, some ideas which have worked for in certain cases, certain contexts, and can be tested and tried again. And that's what really I'm going to be talking about. However, when you talk about simplicity, it's slightly more tricky when you apply in a very, very digital and internet context, and I'm going to be talking about some of that. And before I walk into principles, let me sort of tell you as to the fundamental philosophy with which I personally work with. So if you look at, on one side you have complexity and the other side you have simplicity from a product's perspective. So these are the two choices that you have. You can design complex products and complex services, and on the other side you can design very, very simple products and services. On this side you have products and services which are loaded with utility and function, which means that a product that I pick up has a lot of features and functions as to what it can do from a capability perspective. But on the other side, it is delight, really. So if you look at when you work in the bottom left quadrant, which means that adding a lot of complexity, and by adding a lot of utility and function, you end up playing with poorly designed products and services. But eventually you have to start there. That's a place wherein most of the designers begin with. But then the next logical step is to sort of, while you continue to remain with those many utility and functions, but you try and make it very, very simple. You will probably make a product which is a little more usable, but with very little differentiation. So it's just like any other product out there in the market which serves a lot of utility and function, but you have specifically tried to make it very, very simple, or you have made an attempt to make it simple or simplest than what it was. However, when you add complexity and delight, which means that you're trying to make it very, very experiential for people, but you're not dealing with the complexity, you end up making something which we can possibly call as gamification, right? So gamification is the entire subject which we are all aware of today, which means that there is a specific function out there which people are not doing. Let's gamify it so that they will be able to do it, which means that we are not dealing with the complexity as to why people are not doing it, but we are just trying to do a sugar coating on it by gamifying it so that people end up doing some of it. The actual genius design, and the genius design when I was talking about diagrams previously, which is very, very difficult to achieve, is that when you make a product very, very simple and delightful at the same time without compromising on utility and function, the core values of the product remaining that intact. So my sense is that when today as designers, as product managers, as people who are working on creating new products and services, we should always be thinking about how do I reduce complexity but not compromising on, not reducing the core value of the product, making it delightful and simple. And that's the quadrant that all of us have to really focus on to ensure that our products remain very, very simple and minimalistic and joyful to people who would like to use some of those products. So I think there is a lot of philosophy, there are a lot of things that I spoke about. Now I want to sort of come to some of the principles and possibly expose you to some of the examples out there in the real world that I think are following some of the principles to make these products simpler. This is a possible list. Obviously, this is not a complete list, or this is not the only list out there which will help you make products much more simpler. But this is just one list that I have sort of created here. Moving it far. Now, what does it really mean? So, I used to ask questions to people as to, everybody used to find iPhone being a very simple, or iOS being a very simple operating system, or iPhone, using an iPhone is a kiddo's job. I think today you would see advertisement wherein a 3-year kid or just a newborn baby is using an iOS or an iPhone. How does it really work? So it's just not believable that why Android is not able to do it, or why let's say Windows 8 is not able to do it, and how come iOS or Apple is successfully able to do it. I think the reason is that what they've done is that they've sort of taken the complexity out of the phone and put it in a complex software like an iTunes, which is supposed to be used on a desktop, which is much more complex as a system, but allows you to do much more complex jobs, as opposed to something like a phone, which is a small form factor, is meant for small simple operations and small simple tasks, which means that what you've done is that you haven't really removed the complexity from the system completely, but you have sort of moved it far. You're saying that if you want to manage your music, if you want to manage your photos, if you want to manage your videos, if you want to manage your contacts and so on and so forth, you need to go to a system which is complex as iTunes, and then you do it all there and then bring it all back into the phone, which means, sync it back to the phone, which means all the complex operations are happening in a complex software which is being dealt on a complex hardware and so on and so forth. That's why you end up making a simple phone, keeping it simple. So what you're doing is that you're just moving it far. The second idea is thoughtful elimination. Now, there's a very interesting word put in there. It's just not eliminating. It is actually thoughtful elimination. We say that, without features and functions, people will not buy your products, and if people don't buy your products, you will not sustain in the market. So you need to thoughtfully think about as to what can be taken out without really disrupting the purpose and the core value of the product. And ensure that don't make it a bore. So you're not trying to downgrade a product. You're just trying to simplify it, and that's the core message here. Sometimes I think we all know that there is the whole paradox of choices, and when you have you need to deal with choices. So if you give a lot of choices to people out there, people tend to get confused. People tend to feel that the product is complex, and that's also where I believe that radio, the standard radio, FM radio, whatever, is much simpler a product or a solution to some of our entertainment needs than complex CD player system or advanced music system, because it is really not allowing you to make a choice as to which music you want to listen to. It is completely random, and you look forward to that randomness of the radio because you find a joy that you don't know as to what's going to come next, what's number is going to come next in your car, and you enjoy that experience of it. So I think thoughtfully managing choices which are offered to people can actually help you reduce complexity as well. And this is one example that is a favorite to me, is that sometimes if you have a lot of choices, organizing these choices also helps. So for example, if you have data like this, and if you put some degree of organization around it, you can actually make it look like this. It's the same set of data, but then suddenly you see that it starts to make more sense, because all you've done is that you have just put some more organization around it, and then you can organize it to the next level and make it look even better. So you can see that how data became sort of knowledge just by putting some sort of organization structure around it, and it started to make more sense to all of us. Another interesting example, this is a coffee menu. Most of us go to a coffee bar and try and decide as to which coffee I should be ordering, and there's this whole simple organization of a menu structure which is made visually. So you can see as to how much coffee you get, how much milk, and how much of a froth or a cream you get, and what is the size of the cup and a coffee, how much coffee you'll get in different types of coffee that are available to you as choices. Now suddenly, just because you have put in a lot of organization and also made it visual, the ability for you to make a choice as to which coffee I should be ordering has become multifold. Speed, things that are done faster looks simpler, and here's a very interesting example, and you would have seen in Facebook. I'm sure that it would have taken Facebook a lot of time to sort of put it out there, code it, test it, but then you can just put a random query and Facebook will bring you the right result, and right result in probably lightning fast result as well. So the principle that is really working behind from a psychology perspective is instant gratification, progressive disclosure, and style deception. What we have also noticed is that speed has different connotations. There was this small experiment done with a small group of users, wherein one group of users were asked to copy a heavy file from one drive to another drive, and another user was asked to do the same thing, but in the second case they showed a display as to how much is being copied. when in the second case wherein they displayed the status of files being copied, it actually took 20 minutes more than the previous one. But when the status was showed upfront, people felt that it was half time faster than the previous one. So, speed can actually sometimes it can be a deceptive thing by showing the status. By bringing constraint and scarcity is another sort of principle wherein this is an interesting example from Dribble. One of the problems that some of these sites, community sites have is how to get the right data being populated on sites. So they allow you to only upload 3 pieces of content, and once you upload 3 pieces of content and individual content gets number of likes and hits, then they will open up the 4th slot for you. So which means that it is not a ever-ending opened up story for you wherein you can upload as much as you want. So building constraints and making things scarce can also help you bring simplicity in your products. Pattern recognition. Now, another site which I like is called ilike.com, and they offer music of interest to people, and so they're like, I don't know, umpteen amount of choices from a music perspective, different languages, different genres and whatnot. So I think the onboarding process on ilike.com is very interesting, wherein when you register on ilike.com for the first time, on one of these pages will actually show you some of the singers and artists that you will have probably interest in, and you go and click I like, and when you go to the next page, you will see that based on what you had clicked in the previous page, some of these choices that are made upfront to you now are more relevant. And as you go to the 3rd, the 4th page, you start seeing that you're getting to see as to the music that you like is being sort of affronted to you intelligently based on all the clicks that you had made in the past. So the system is intelligent, wherein it is recognizing as to what kind of a music you would like and predicting intelligently and giving those choices back to you. And that experience itself makes it very, very easy for people to get on board it and also tell the system as to what kind of music do you like to listen to. Making it humane, we've seen that sometimes our language, the language that is being affronted to users can be very, very complex, and how that complex language can be converted into a much more human, human to human conversation. And when you do that, so people realize that they're not talking to the computer anymore. They're talking to another human who's probably sitting out there and can talk the same language, can respond to the human needs as opposed to technology. And in recent days, you would have seen a movie called Her, wherein people really fall in love with technology because technology starts behaving much more human than what it is today. So, and I think just skipping through some of these slides, and I think the last part, maybe the second last part is very important, is that when you design for something, when you design for products and services, you got to design in a specific context. So it is very important for you to understand the context in which you are designing. For example, if you look at this simple piece of communication, which is a table here, and which is a table that allows a user to look at as to track different shipments that the person is managing. And so you need to understand, you need to go back to the users and ask as to what is the core function that you are trying to do here. And you'll probably get an answer that, I'm trying to understand as to what is the status of a shipment that I had shipped last week. Has it arrived or has it not arrived? And if it is not arrived, where is it getting stuck? Now, if that was the context in which a design is to be done, you could, by understanding the context, you can actually do a very interesting design. Maybe something like this one, which clearly tells you as to, you've got these 4 shipments, look at different statuses that these shipments are into, what is the stages that this shipment has gone by, and if you look at the 4th shipment, it is actually stuck somewhere, and what is the reason why it is stuck and where it is stuck, and what is it that the user can actually do at this stage to ensure that the shipment moves from this stage to the next stage. Now this sort of a design can only happen when you understand why people are trying to look at that piece of information and what is it that needs to be solved in that context. And I think the last point that I was trying to make, which is the last slide or the last piece of content that I have here, is really about making stuff humor, or making stuff, adding some humor to some of the serious conversations sometimes. And what you see on the left hand side is a real sort of a signage, which one on the one hand side it says, "No parking, violators will be towed away at owner's expense." On the other side, you will have very interesting one done, which says, "Curbside pickup only, all others will be crushed and melted." Right? So, just by reading it, people know that there is this pure play humor to it, but it sort of conveys the message very, very clearly, and it makes it very simple in passing that message on. And people remember it. Tomorrow if you come back, as to last time you read this, which was a completely non-standard way of putting a message across of this kind, and you shouldn't be repeating it. And on the right hand side, you see another example of adding humor to very serious conversation from southwest.com. It's a real example taken from there. And this really talks about what people should do in case of an emergency. So I'm just going to read it out to you because I have a minute here. In the event of a sudden loss of cabin pressure, oxygen mask will descend from the ceiling. Stop screaming, grab the mask and pull it over your face. If you have a small child traveling with you, secure your mask before assisting with theirs. If you are traveling with 2 small children, decide now which one you love more. And ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to smoke, the smoking section on this airplane is on the wing. And if you can light them up, you can smoke them. And there may be 50 ways to leave your lover, but there are only 4 ways out of this aircraft. That's a very serious piece of information, and which I'm sure that people tend to ignore. Being a frequent flyer, people who believe that they fly often, they really need not know this information. But in Southwest Airlines, when you read it, it's always there in your mind. So next time you travel Southwest Airlines, you look forward to this information again. So I think the point really is that adding some small humor to some of these serious conversations, serious tasks, can actually lead to memorable and very, very simple and easy experiences. So this is where I think this was probably from a philosophy, principles, what I'm seeing out there, how you can design simple and minimalistic, not only products and solutions and services, but also sometimes communications out there that people remember. And I'm sure that if we design products with some of these principles in mind, we'll be also able to make some business value out there as well. So thanks a lot for everybody for the time that they've given so far. So I'm open for questions now.
Thanks for the insightful presentation, Vinay. We are yet to receive questions from the audience. I request the attendees to post their queries if they think they would like to ask something from Vinay. We are open to questions, so we would wait for some time.
Sure.
In the meanwhile, if you would like to talk something about which the slides, I could see that you have missed some of the slides. So if you would like to talk about them, that would be great.
Okay. And let me just go back then in that case. So one of the other principles that I wanted to sort of speak about is making information much more visual. And I had one example that I wanted to sort of share with the team here, the participants, is really about a site called Hipmunk, and they have sort of redesigned the site experience of how you will show present flight information back to the user. So we have seen the traditional way in which people present information is really, you have a whole bunch of flights which are listed by price and so on and so forth. In this case, what they have done is that they have sort of listed not only by price, but also talking about airline and also talking about as to what's the flight time between two cities and what are their schedules. So if you really scan from left to right, you will see that which is the early morning flights, but at what price range. So I think sometimes having a visual organization done to a complex piece of information can help people make choices faster. That was the slide that I sort of wanted to show to people.
Right. So if you can go to the questions doc now, there are people who want to ask queries from you. So if you can read out the questions and their answers, Vinay.
Sure. Okay, so I think the first question is from Yashraj. Yeah, very interesting question. How can we implement Simplexity in designing software or more specifically mobile phones? So Yashraj, thanks for the questions first of all. I think as I was talking about that from a software perspective and specifically from a mobile perspective, the two things which, and I'm just going back to the principle that I said, two things from a mobility perspective. One is that thoughtful elimination. So when people are trying to use stuff on mobility, considering the bandwidth and considering the form factor and the screen size and sizes of control, it is very important for you to sort of eliminate what is not needed on mobile. And that is something that you need to think about by putting the social things like what people are trying to do, in what context are they trying to do it. So for example, if you're trying to redesign or rather design a mobile application for an airline website. Now if you go to airline's website, you will find a lot of information in terms of you can access your loyalty points, you can access your previous flights, you can actually check, you can print boarding passes, you can check in, and so on and so forth. But then you need to ask a question as to if somebody is traveling and somebody is traveling using this mobile phone, what is the bare minimum information that the person needs to have on his mobile phone, without which the app itself does not make any sense. And that's when you start thinking about the minimum viable feature list. And you also need to think about in which context people will be using it. So for example, if I am on my way from my home to the airport, and that's when I pull up my mobile phone to check as to if my flight is on time, then we are talking about as to, hey, it makes sense to sort of display the flight status alerts. However, it is unlikely for somebody to log into a airline's website to check the flight status alerts. And that's when you start thinking about as to what makes sense on mobile and what is it that you can thoughtfully eliminate from the mobile site or mobile application, and what is the context in which people are trying to access the mobile application. Okay, the second question is that can interfaces fully replace language? Any examples? If you look at in today, I don't think in next 5 years, I don't think in next 10 years, I don't think so. Reason being is that still while technology is sort of maturing, becoming much more advanced, wherein you have things like Siri and things like Google, which works completely on command-based or voice command-based systems. But then imagine yourself talking to your phone or talking to your computer at all times, which is not a very human thing at the end of it. So I think as humans, either only three people that we're speaking to. One is we can talk to each other. Second is that we can talk to our pets, and third thing is that we can talk to our gods. And I don't think that human beings have found out the fourth person to talk to today. So talking to computers is still sort of a far ahead thing in the future. But I don't think that that will be too far. I don't think that 10, 15 years beyond that we will still be talking about that we'll be talking to computers or not. So as the technology is maturing, I'm sure that we'll still be talking to computers. And if you start talking to computers, will there be no interface? No, I don't think so. There will still be a visual metaphor that needs to queued into your verbal metaphor as well. So both of them have to work hand in hand. So Ashutosh has asked a very interesting question. Simplicity is just a way how people think. It's relative to complex. Is there any way how to give simplest thing to end user? Again, Ashutosh, as I was talking in my presentation throughout, that there is obviously no silver bullet with which you can achieve simplicity in your designs, and even if you are able to achieve simplicity in your design, it is highly likely that people will not accept it, for both from market reasons and also from psychology reasons as well. So there is no single thing that can work in your favor to attain the highest level of simplicity in your designs. I think Manish Manikar asked a question, what is your advice for a mobile app design in Indian context? And my advice in Indian context is doing, I think before I can answer the question, I think the advice would be to do thorough amount of user research, because India is equal to the rest of the world, not in terms of the size, but in terms of the variance. So I don't think that we are comparable in terms of the variety of cultures, the variety of language, the variety of cultural notion in terms of the design itself. How you look at colors, patterns, size, typography, different languages, how these languages are rendered across different mobile phones and form factors. I think thinking about one size fit all kind of a thing wouldn't really work so well if specifically designing something for Indian audiences. So my recommendation would be to understand your user base very, very differently by doing interesting user research or maybe in-depth user research before arriving to design decisions like these ones. Okay. Mukesh Pant has asked an interesting question. How do you decide the core features and secondary features? So Mukesh, the answer to that question is not very difficult, but at the same time very, very difficult. So for example, when you're buying a car, the core features are the ones without which the car cannot function. So for example, if you're buying a car, you still need 4 wheels and a steering wheel and a brake and probably a gear shifting mechanism or a control. Maybe you can automate that. But you can live without if it doesn't have an AC, if it doesn't have power windows, if it doesn't have security and safety features, right? So those becomes the secondary features. Now, the minimal viable product is a very standard method that is used pretty much everywhere, including in software development industry, by which people actually decide as to which are the core functions, which are the peripheral functions of a system. So you can use that. Sabu Francis has asked again a question that is very close to my heart, which is around architecture. I'm an architect. Can architectural space usage be used directly in user interface on web? Any examples? So Sabu, I think every good web design or every good site design example that you would see out there, which you think is a good site design, will follow the architectural design principles in some way or the other, which is around space distribution, which is around how different spaces will be used very, very differently. For example, if you consider architecture, there are 3 kind of spaces, which means private spaces, semi-private spaces, and public spaces. So if you look at your own house, while your drawing room or living room is public space, which is meant for everybody to be used. Your bedroom is a semi-private space because you might be sharing it with someone, and your washroom is a completely private space because once you're there, nobody uses it at the same time. Now, the same sort of principles gets applied to web design and design for products. So if you go to Facebook, your wall is not your space. While it is called your wall, but anybody can come in and post stuff there, and anybody can look at it. But then you have a semi-private space, which is your messenger system, wherein people are there, they can post to you and you can post to them, etc., etc. But then there are your settings, your personal, your private spaces within Facebook, which are only limited to your space, wherein nobody has access to. So that is something which is only accessible by you. So I think those principles are used and applied everywhere in web design, be it structuring content and be structuring spaces, be deciding as to who will access what kind of a thing. Yashraj has asked an interesting question again. In interest of simple, complex product varies from customer to customer. Should we consider customer mindset while developing product? I think the simple answer is yes. You have to consider customer's mindset in developing product. Although there is a small connotation to it, if you look at Henry Ford said once, if he had gone to people and asked them as to what they would like to use or what they would like to ride, people would have said faster horses, because that's the only thing that they've seen, and he would not have developed a car, right? So while it is good to go back to people and ask and validate as to what they would like to use or whether this is something which is adding value and they would like to pay for it, but only relying on what people tell you is not just good enough. So that's one of the philosophies that I've been hearing, that Apple does not do much of a research when it comes to product, and most of their product decision, most of their design decisions are intuition driven as opposed to user research driven. So simple answer, yes, I think it's important to design what people would like to pay for, would like to use, and also validate some of those designs, but then relying is not important. Relying is something that you should stay away from.
Due to the time constraint, I request Vinay to take the unanswered questions offline, which I will share with you through email. So if you would like to sum up the session for today, you can do it now, Vinay.
Okay, just to sum it up, I think design is a broad discipline. My suggestion, recommendation is that if you're a software designer or a mobile designer, learn from variety of sources, whether it is be it architecture, be it industrial design or product design, because there is a lot that you can learn. Because of the fact that the software that we are designing today is something that we started to design now, but industrial design architecture has been there for many hundreds of years now, and things that we've started to sort of figure out, people have done it in past. So learn from it and try and design software to be much more meaningful and simple from here on. My best wishes to all the people who attended, and thanks a lot for them.
And I'm really thankful to our guest speaker for conducting this wonderful webinar. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgig.com by tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Vinay, for all your time. Have a great evening ahead.
You too, Aradhana. Thanks a lot for hosting this for us.
Thank you, Vinay. Thanks a lot.